On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, Day 186. Hamas leaders have suggested that the movement is going to reject the latest proposals of the hostage negotiations, stating that they do not address the basic demands of the organization. El-Qassam Brigades report firing mortars at the Netzarim corridor, the area that the IDF is maintaining that divides the Gaza Strip from north to south. Record number of humanitarian aid trucks enter the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. The US, the UK, and France are demanding that Israel increase these numbers. Responding to Israel's attack against the Iranian consulate, it was reported today that Iran is debating whether to order its militias to carry out the retaliation or to retaliate from Iran itself. US President Biden stated that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is making mistakes and that he does not approve of his approach, asking Israel to accept a 6 to 8 week truce in the war in order to allow the entrance of food and medicines into the Gaza Strip. Hello everyone, I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine. Here to bring you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It's currently the evening of April 9th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of April 10th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, Sami Abu Zoheri, one of Hamas's prominent figures, stated today with regards to the latest proposal that came out of the Cairo negotiations that, quote, the new American proposal focuses only on the hostages and ignores the demands of our people, adding, the proposal does not include an IDF withdrawal or an end to the fighting. We cannot accept this offer that does not relate to a permanent ceasefire. His statements to some extent lend credence to the report I gave yesterday from Al-Arabi al-Jadid that stated that the U.S. compromise only focused on the first phase of the deal and did not address the second phases. Other reports I gave yesterday from Al Jazeera said it only focused on the second phases. The first phase does in fact include a hostage exchange and a 6 to 8 week truce, however it does not relate to a broader ceasefire and an IDF withdrawal. Following this and other statements that were made throughout the day, there were a lot more pessimistic reports that came out. The U.S. National Security Advisor also admitted that Hamas's position is far less encouraging. However, again, he also added that this is not Hamas's official response yet. This is just statements that are being made, and all sides are currently awaiting Hamas's official response. Amidst this, and continuing statements that were made yesterday by the IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi and Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, the IDF today again stated that the military is prepared to handle a bulk of Gazan civilians returning to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, adding that should this be the decision of the political establishment, it is not going to destroy or damage the war efforts thus far. So just to summarize where things are standing right now is everyone is waiting for Hamas's response. Thus far, the different responses from the leaders from yesterday, Osama Hamdan, today Sami Abu Zoheri, the different responses have all been very negative and pessimistic. However, Hamas has yet to say no. Should an answer come that allows for more negotiations, it has been clarified that the negotiating parties are prepared to jump back to Cairo in order to continue negotiations. Likely Hamas's response will come in either tomorrow or the day after. It is reportedly going to take 2 to 3 days. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there was one rocket that was fired from the Gaza Strip targeting the southern parts of Israel today. A rocket was fired towards the areas of Kfar Aza. Reportedly, it was intercepted by the IDF. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the El-Qassam Brigades reported carrying out mortar attacks against IDF soldiers in the outskirts of the Sajaiya area in Gaza City. The IDF is not operating ground forces as far as what is reported in the areas of Sajaiya. It is possible, however, that this relates to more of the buffer zone that the IDF is creating alongside the border between Gaza and Israel that is right next to the areas of Sajaiya. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF reported carrying out an operation in the areas of Deir el-Balah, with substantial gun battles and airstrikes involved. According to reports, the targets of these airstrikes included military structures and launching sites from where rockets were fired yesterday. Substantial bombing was also reported in the Al-Nuseirat refugee camp in the central parts of the Gaza Strip. 14 Palestinians were reportedly killed in this bombing. In addition to this, in the central parts of the Strip, the El-Qassam Brigades reported firing mortars at an IDF headquarters and engineering units in the Netzarim corridor. The Netzarim corridor is the last place right now that the IDF is maintaining its ground forces. This is the east-to-west corridor that divides the Gaza Strip from north to south. In addition to this, the IDF today added information about the assassination that it carried out yesterday of Hatem al-Amri, the mayor of al-Maghazi refugee camp. According to what the military reported today, al-Amri was the chairman of Hamas's emergency committees in the central camp. The emergency committees are the organizations that Hamas established in order to maintain governance in the Gaza Strip during the war. The report added that his role as part of these committees was to be in charge of rocket fire from the central parts of the Gaza Strip, targeting the different areas of Israel, and that is the reason that he was targeted for assassination. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, in Han Yunis, the IDF reported carrying out an airstrike, assassinating a Hamas operative who participated in the October 7th attack. It was not reported who this operative was, or specifically where this airstrike took place within Han Yunis. In addition to this, in Rafah, there were reports that the IDF carried out airstrikes in the western parts of the city. However, it was not reported what specifically was targeted, or how many people were killed in these airstrikes. Other news related to the Gaza Strip, and a lot of news that are related to the impending invasion of Rafah, which may occur. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu visited new draftees of the IDF today, and amidst all the pressure from the United States and other countries in the world on Israel to not carry out the invasion of Rafah, he stated, and I quote, "We will destroy the Hamas battalions, including in Rafah. There is no power in the world that will stop us. Many are trying, but it won't do any good." In addition, responding to what Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said yesterday with regards to the fact that a date for the Rafah invasion has been set, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken echoed today's statements that were made by other officials in the U.S. yesterday, stating that the United States does not know about a date for a possible Israeli invasion of Rafah, adding, "The discussion with Israel continues, and we expect to meet our Israeli colleagues to discuss the Gaza situation next week." National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan also stated similar things today, referring to a face-to-face meeting that is due to occur in the coming weeks. This relates to the delegation that Israel is expected to send to the United States to debate if and when a Rafah invasion will take place. Several hours after these, in addition to these denials by the United States, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant reportedly explicitly contradicted Prime Minister Netanyahu's statements, stating in a conversation with the U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin that Israel does not have a set date for the Rafah operation, and that there are still necessary steps that have to be taken in order to prepare and carry out this invasion. In addition to this, Israel's finance minister and the head of the religious Zionism party, Bezalel Smotrich, stated today that Hamas has said no to a hostage deal, and that the response must be the immediate invasion of Rafah and stopping all humanitarian aid that, quote, is flowing into the Gaza Strip through Hamas. In addition to this, AP today quoted Israeli sources stating that in preparation for the Rafah invasion, Israel has acquired some 40,000 large-scale tents as part of its plans to evacuate Palestinian civilians from Rafah and house them elsewhere in the Gaza Strip. The last time it was reported about what is going to be Israel's plan in the Gaza Strip, it was stated that Israel is going to create what it called humanitarian islands within the Gaza Strip and prepare a lot of food, medical supplies, and shelters in these areas and then evacuate Palestinian civilians to there. This is the second report now that is stating that Israel has acquired 40,000 large-scale tents that can house 12 people each in order to prepare for this evacuation. Regarding casualties, no IDF soldiers reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. This leaves the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 260. 2 IDF soldiers reported injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. This brings the total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 1,561. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 153 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians who were killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 33,360. The number of Palestinians who were injured in the Gaza Strip was not updated in the last 24 hours, so that number officially remains 75,993. I will say that it is surprising that there is an increase in the daily average of Palestinians who have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the IDF withdrawal from Han Yunis. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip actually reports on the amount of dead bodies that that arrive in the different Gaza hospitals. So it is possible that these are people who were not killed in the last 24 hours, but rather people who were killed in different IDF operations, and only after the IDF withdrawal has their body been brought to the hospital and brought to burial, and thus they are being tallied up now, even though they were killed previously. But again, that is my own analysis, not necessarily what the Palestinian Health Ministry reported. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken related today to the increased humanitarian aid that is entering the Gaza Strip in the last 3 days, stating that the U.S. is following the developments and expects to see important steps to continue to be taken in the coming days, including opening a northern land crossing to allow aid to enter the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, i.e. the Erez crossing. In a similar vein, the UK Foreign Minister David Cameron also gave a statement today, and he was much more explicit about what he expects to see. He stated that by the time he visits the region next week, along with the German Foreign Minister, he expects to see a substantial implementation of the promises that Israel has made to the United Kingdom, including expanding the hours of the Kerem Shalom crossing, increasing the amount of trucks that enter the Gaza Strip to 500 trucks per day, giving protective gear to humanitarian workers, opening the Erez crossing, opening a corridor from Jordan to facilitate 100 trucks that will enter the Gaza Strip per day, and developing a mechanism that will ensure the safety of humanitarian aid workers in the Gaza Strip. Regarding the entrance of aid to the Gaza Strip, there were continuous missions of aid paradropping that were carried out in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. In addition, regarding the entrance of aid trucks, another record was broken after the record has been broken for 2 days in a row already. A total of 468 aid trucks were reported to have been inspected and entered the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. The IDF coordinator of activity in the Palestinian territories emphasized in his daily report today that UN agencies are still having challenges in effectively distributing the amount of aid that is crossing into the Gaza Strip. This has been a repeated statement of the IDF, saying that more aid can enter the Gaza Strip. However, the aid agencies within the Strip are not distributing that aid effectively, and that is the reason for the humanitarian crisis within the Gaza Strip. Moving on to the West Bank, there was substantial IDF activity that was reported in several parts of the West Bank in the last 24 hours. These include the areas of Akbat Jaber near Jericho, where confrontations also erupted and a Palestinian was injured by live fire. In addition, raids were also reported in the areas of Tulkarem and the surrounding villages. A total of 9 to 10 Palestinians were reported arrested in the West Bank in the last 24 hours. In addition to this, the New York Times published a report today citing U.S., Israeli, and Iranian government officials, stating that Iran is maintaining secret smuggling routes throughout the Middle East, trying to smuggle weaponry into the West Bank in order to turn that into the next front that Israel has to deal with. The routes are reportedly maintained by intelligence officers, militias, and crime gangs alongside the different parts of the route. The routes reportedly go from Iran through Iraq, and from there they split off into different directions, going towards Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, with the key figures being Bedouins who eventually smuggle the weaponry from Jordan into the West Bank. The report adds that Iran is expanding its activity following the attack that occurred in the consulate in Damascus last week, and that this is seen as part of Iran's plan to be able to ignite the Middle East if and when it needs to, if war does escalate. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel and to Lebanon and Syria. This is one of the days since the war began that there were no reports of rockets or missiles that were fired from Hezbollah targeting the northern parts of Israel. There were several alerts of drones in the area, however they were then reported as false alerts. Regarding IDF activity, there's also very minimal IDF activity that was reported in Lebanon. Artillery fire was reported in the areas of Adaharia and Tir Herfa. In addition to that, El-Manar reported IDF attacks in the region between El Azaya and Kila village, adding that the target area is the same region in which remnants of an IDF drone that was downed by Hezbollah a few days ago should have landed. Hours later, the IDF confirmed this, stating that it carried out attacks and destroyed the downed drone in Lebanon. However, again, that was the only airstrike that was reported in the last 24 hours, and there were no reports of rockets or missiles that were launched. Regarding Syria, the IDF reportedly carried out 2 airstrikes against Syrian military positions in the last 24 hours. The first took place in the Mahajah region, and it was reportedly a response to the rocket that was fired from Syria targeting the parts of the Golan Heights yesterday. The second targeted an outpost of the Syrian military on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights. This happened later in the day. The IDF stated with regards to this attack that it followed intelligence showing that this site was being used by Hezbollah operatives, not by the Syrian army, and stating that the Syrian army is the one that is responsible for the region, and any Hezbollah activity that occurs within the facilities of the Syrian army are going to be attacked by the IDF. Moving on to some of the regional developments, there are conflicting reports that came out today about the expected involvement of pro-Iranian militias in Iran's expected retaliation to the consulate attack in Damascus that occurred last week. CNN quoted 2 officials today within the intelligence community in the United States, estimating that Iran will avoid carrying out a retaliation itself in order to not risk regional escalation, and that the country has tasked already a militia in the area to carry out a large-scale attack against Israel using drones and missiles in order to, on the one hand, show the force of Iran in its retaliation, on the other hand, not be involved itself. Later in the day, however, Sharq al-Awsat quoted 2 different sources in pro-Iranian militias that are part of the coalition that is called the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, stating that the militias are unlikely to take part in Iran's retaliation. The report did add, however, that while the militias do not intend to re-engage their attacks against the United States, they are still waiting Iran's instructions as well. Iran may still instruct them to carry out attacks against the Golan Heights or to target U.S. bases in the area. So right now it is unclear. Everyone's expecting that the Iranian retaliation is going to happen within this week. A lot of different reports said that Iran is expected to retaliate still within Ramadan or right adjacent to Ramadan. That leaves it this week. Remains to be seen. In Israel, the military is on very high alert with regards to this retaliation. Again, we'll wait to see in the coming days. Other regional developments, this time in Yemen. The U.S. Central Command reported intercepting a nautical missile that was fired by the Houthis towards a U.S. ship in the Gulf of Aden. There were no reports of any injuries or if the missile actually managed to hit the ship, so it is expected that the missile was either intercepted or that it missed its target. In addition to this, a report came out today stating that at the end of 2023, the United States confiscated a large shipment of weapons that were sent from Iran to the Houthis, and reportedly this shipment included 5,000 AK-47s, automatic weapons, RPGs, and over 500,000 bullets. According to the U.S. Central Command, the confiscated weaponry was at first taken to U.S. Central Command, then it was diverted and handed over to Ukraine in order to assist Ukraine in its war against Russia. Moving on to some of the political reports of the last 24 hours, the U.S. President Biden expressed today extreme criticism of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu during an interview with the Spanish Univision network. Asked about Netanyahu, he stated, and I quote, "I think what he is doing is a mistake, and I don't agree with his approach." He stated that all I'm asking is for Israelis to call for a truce and allow 6 to 8 weeks of food and medicines to enter the Gaza Strip, adding, "I've spoken to the Saudis, Jordanians, and Egyptians. They're all prepared to send food. I don't believe there's any excuse to not let food and medicines in to people who need it. That is what needs to happen now." Again, this is one of the most harshest criticisms personally leveled at Prime Minister Netanyahu by President Biden, showing the growing rift between the sides. In addition to this rift between the Biden administration and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government, it was reported today that a string of U.S. Republican congresspeople have also been expressing behind closed doors their frustration with the way Israel is handling the war. Israeli family members of hostages, who are currently holding meetings with congresspeople in the United States, stated that many different Republican officials sounded aligned with the Biden administration with regards to the frustration with how Israel is handling the war. Some of them called it Bibi's war, i.e. the war of Netanyahu, and stated that public support in the United States for Israel is diminishing as a result of the way the war is being handled. In addition to this, with all this friction between the U.S. administration and the Israeli government, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken did state today, however, and I quote, "It is important that a lot of the passion, rage, and anger that is thrown at Israel due to the plight of the Palestinians in Gaza be diverted towards Hamas. It remains inconceivable to me that the world is almost deafeningly silent when it comes to Hamas." Other political news, there are ongoing protests in Israel by family members of hostages who are calling upon the government to agree to the terms of a hostage deal and to return the hostages from the Gaza Strip. I mention this because this may end up leading to more friction within Israel's government, which in turn may expedite the fractures that are already seen within the coalition and eventually drive Israel towards elections. Other political news. Senior officials in the United Kingdom stated today that a legal examination of the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip has led the British authorities to the conclusion that Israel is not living up to its international legal obligations to allow the entrance of humanitarian aid into Gaza Strip. Despite this, it was reported that following an extended conversation between Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz and the UK Foreign Minister David Cameron, the UK, quote, "for now," will not place any limitations on weapons exports from the UK to Israel, in part due to the increases in humanitarian aid that is going into the Gaza Strip in the last week, and due to the obligations that Israel Katz made to Foreign Minister David Cameron. It was also reported, however, that Britain is still insisting on allowing the Red Cross to visit the Nukba prisoners in Israeli jails. The Nukba prisoners are the Hamas's commando units, most of them participated in October 7th. This comes amidst the report that I stated above in the humanitarian section about the list of demands that Cameron gave Israel Katz on how the UK expects an increase in the humanitarian aid that goes into the Gaza Strip, and more broadly, how the UK expects Israel to address the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. In addition to this, France's foreign minister, Stéphane Séjourné, stated today that more pressure and possibly even sanctions must be applied on Israel in order to get the country to open new crossings for humanitarian aid that will enter the Gaza Strip. This is the first time that one of the senior foreign ministers within Europe is explicitly stating that he is considering recommending sanctions against Israel in order to improve the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. Other political news. Following Turkey's statements yesterday that they will retaliate to Israel's refusal to allowing the country to participate in humanitarian paradropping missions in the Gaza Strip, Turkish Commerce Minister Omar Bulat stated today that Turkey is going to limit all exports to Israel until a ceasefire is reached in the Gaza Strip. According to the report, the limitations include 54 categories, including steel, concrete, building equipment, industrial equipment, etc. Responding to this, the Israeli Foreign Ministry stated that Turkey is unilaterally violating trade agreements between the countries and ordered the Foreign Ministry to prepare a list of products that Israel will stop importing from Turkey in addition to these other products. The foreign minister also stated that Israel is going to approach countries and pro-Israeli organizations in the United States to encourage them to stop investments in Turkey, as well as to approaching the U.S. Congress in order to examine if Turkey is violating the boycott laws against Israel, and asking that, if so, the U.S. apply sanctions against Turkey. So this is part of the growing escalation in the political strife between Israel and Turkey since the war began. What we are seeing is that on the one hand, Israel is clearly responding to the international pressure, and specifically the pressure from the United States, following the incident where the IDF killed several workers of the World Central Kitchen in the Gaza Strip, and we're seeing a dramatic increase in the amount of humanitarian aid trucks that are entering the Gaza Strip on the one hand. On the other hand, we're also seeing foreign ministries of different countries using this opportunity to say now is the time to actually make sure that Israel continue to follow through and not just have a momentary increase in humanitarian aid trucks, but actually take on addressing the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip in a more permanent situation. Remains to be seen how that develops and how this may be tied into a truce and a hostage deal should that actually materialize. If you find these reports important, please do remember to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.